Welcome to Election Adda, CPR's informal effort at demystifying the elections for all of you. It's an absolute privilege for me to welcome here to today's Election Adda Roshan Kishore, who has joined us from the Hindustan Times. Roshan is the data and political editor of the Hindustan Times and someone whose ground level reporting and data reporting on the elections has really given us a deep insight into what's happening and leading often to asking important questions on how to reconcile the ground realities with the realities that data and statistics present to us. Roshan, it's an absolute privilege to have you here. Thank you so much for coming. And with Roshan, I have today CPR's resident election guru, Rahul Verma, political scientist and fellow at the Center for Policy Research. Thank you, Rahul, for joining us. And we look forward today to what should be an exciting conversation on the back of the poll of the polls. So we thought that's where we should start today's conversation. Rahul, let me begin with you. Since as our election guru, you have been demystifying polls for all of us here at CPR. Over the last 2 days, the newspaper headlines have been full of what we're learning from the poll of the polls, which seem to suggest that the NDA is going to come back to a thundering majority or almost a majority, 260 plus for the NDA. How do we interpret this? How do we understand this?
Thank you, Yamini. So let me take a step back and try to understand how these polls are conducted. You would remember that we had done a panel discussion with many of these pollsters a couple of weeks back. And on the TV, it might seem that everyone does these polls in a very uniform manner. That's not correct. There are polling agencies who follow very conventional style of polling. They basically go to voters, randomly select them, ask them questions. So these are like field-based surveys. Then you have other polling agencies who conduct their polls on phone. And then there are some polling agencies who don't conduct polls in the conventional sense, but they basically do focus group discussion. But what is interesting about all these different types of polls, that they converge on one point, which is everyone is saying that NDA is leading this race, and most pollsters also agree that NDA is likely to get around 260 seats, which is very close to majority. So I think there are 2 points we must remember. One, these are pre-polls which have been conducted 3 to 4 weeks before the first phase of polling, which is on 11th. And knowing that these polls were conducted right after the Balakot's airstrikes, which means at that moment the nationalistic passions must have been at its peak. So what we see in the polls may be a referral to those nationalistic sentiments. There would be 2 directions from there. One, NDA must have got a momentum from that point and may gain further seats, or that nationalistic passions may subside and NDA may end up getting around 240, 250 seats. So these are the 2 things we must bear in mind.
Thanks, Rahul. We'll come back to this question of the narrative and how that's shaping voter preferences. But let's just stick with what the polls are telling us for a couple more minutes. One of the really interesting things that the polls seem to suggest is that while the NDA and the UPA are gaining somewhat in terms of their vote share, the others are playing a fairly important role. And the CSAS poll, if I'm not wrong, is giving others a significant increase compared with what some of the other polls are saying. So how do we interpret the role of others? And what does that mean in terms of where it will eventually fall when it comes down to government formation?
Okay, so most pollsters, so on TV channels, we basically see the seat forecast.
Right.
But surveys only estimate vote shares, and then statistical models are applied to convert those votes into seats. Now what we see in these, so most of the polls on television do not put a lot of emphasis on the vote share.
Right.
CSAS on the other hand puts out what they have estimated as the vote share. What is interesting and surprising in this election is that both NDA as well as UPA is gaining in number of votes, which is surprising because many of us have thought that 2014 was sort of a glass ceiling for BJP and NDA, and they would not be going above that mark. It seems that BJP is gaining 4% more from 31. So that's one thing which is surprising. And the second thing which is surprising is that the vote shares of others are going down. What usually has been seen, and Roshan pointed out this couple of days ago, that pollsters generally overestimate national parties in their pre-polls. So even in 2014, UPA and BJP was slightly overestimated. Because if this is true, if what polls are projecting now is true, it is going to play a big role in shaping up of our polity in future, which means that regional parties' vote share are going down. Whereas many political commentators and journalists have been pointing out that this election is going to be fought in states and in previous elections also. So if others' vote share is going down, then it means a lot of things are changing and we don't know why these things are.
Roshan, can you comment on this question of the others? Where do you see, how do you interpret this changing vote share, and what do you make of the role of the others in this current game?
Well, if you look at others, I think the main parties, it's always better to go statewide.
Sure.
You have the Trinamool Congress in West Bengal, you have the Biju Janata Dal in Odisha. Andhra, you have actually a very strong contest between two regional parties who at the moment are not aligned to either the TRS and the YSR Congress, TDP and the YSR Congress. Neither of which are aligned to any of the leading alliances. Then we have the DMK. One other formation which is definitely going to lose in terms of vote share is the left. And they have been declining in West Bengal for quite some time. They suffered an electoral defeat in Tripura. And if the surveys are to be believed, the Congress-led UDF looks to be making major inroads in Kerala as well. Now, it will be interesting to see as to how Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal and Biju Janata Dal in Odisha perform. Because these are two states where the BJP, it is being felt that they could make major gains. Now, one does not know, even if they were to decline, suffer some decline in terms of vote share. Will that necessarily translate into seats? A decline in seats is a difficult question to answer, because you could have a situation like, say, the Aam Aadmi Party in 2014 Delhi elections, and they went from nowhere to around 30% of the vote share, and yet nothing came in terms of seats, because you have to cross the critical distance to sort of convert votes into seats. So it will be interesting to say, but I think it will also lead to the question of what role they would play in government formation. Now, Chandrababu Naidu contested as part of the NDA platform in 14, and that has not happened. YSR has been sort of posturing both ways. I think it is important that it's not seen as pro-Modi, because Chandrababu is trying to make the special status into a big issue. Similarly, Tamil Nadu, now that both Karunanidhi and Jayalalitha have passed away, and especially ADMK is in a state of flux. I mean, even bypolls were not held in many of the seats. So we have absolutely no idea how the ADMK is going to perform. DMK also has gone a generational shift, which is although a bit more smooth than what the ADMK has had to suffer. So these parties will continue to be big X factors in these elections. I think how Tamil Nadu votes, which party sort of gets more in Andhra, whether say TRS in Telangana or YSR Congress in Andhra decide to do business with the BJP is what will matter. And I think these decisions, more than any sort of principal ideological questioning, will also matter a lot on how much the BJP comes close to the halfway mark or the NDA. Because the NDA this time I think is a much more shrunk lot. TDP is one lot, but otherwise also, where even Janata Dal United, which on paper would look like a big addition to the NDA camp from in Bihar compared to 14, we do not know how Nitish Kumar is going to be performing in these elections, because he jumped ship too many times. Nobody knows what is happening. Now, coming back to the larger question of how one should see the polls, I look at it slightly differently. You see, 14 was not a normal election in our country. It was after 30 years that a political party got a majority on its own. And the coalition, of course, if I am not wrong, was 333 or something. That was a huge majority to begin with. So if the surveys are showing between say 260 to 290 to 295 for the NDA, the trend seems to be declining for the NDA.
Sure.
Now, if we, all of us who followed Narendra Modi's campaign in 14, I mean, it was essentially, he's a mass leader par excellence, probably the best we have in our country today. But he exploited anti-incumbency vis-a-vis the UPA, especially UPA, due to the Hill. So it was essentially of a leader who would change things. And I would say 80% of the narrative was economy. That there is a Gujarat model which is implemented at the national level would turn things drastically. Now, the fact that the BJP wants to make this election into a national security identity core Hindutva election from the Gujarat model election which we had in 14 suggests that at least the economic pro-incumbency is not something which the NDA is banking on. Now, we have seen Narendra Modi perform as a leader who could exploit anti-incumbency to the hill. Will we see in 2019 Narendra Modi as the leader who could also exploit pro-incumbency and not as economic factors, but what can essentially be described as emotive issues and beyond the point? That is the big question which we need to answer. And I think this is why it is all the more difficult. We are coming from a very high base, which already seems to be declining. But even if the BJP were to end at, say, 220, 230, the other big question is how does the Congress perform?
Exactly.
Because one big thing, and which is also a part of the decline of the left. So, earlier elections in 2004 was the biggest example. Left ended up with a tally of 60.
Yeah.
That provided a stable base for any anti-BJP political formation. Because here was a group of 60, 61 MPs who would not do business with the BJP. They could put that sort of pressure on other regional players from all sides. Now that the left is not going to get that kind of seats, I think we would see far more political promiscuity in the regional parties who would look to sort of maximize their own interests.
But Roshan, that also tells us that, sorry, I must, my colleagues will be very upset if I don't remind you, hashtag Election Adda, and please do ask questions. We will be having a Q&A based on the discussion after over the next 20 minutes or so. But back to you, Roshan. So on this question of alliances and what then will serve as the glue, I think one of the big puzzles for me certainly is that if you look at where we were in January, and of course 3 months is a long time in an election season, but nonetheless in January it did appear as though the Congress with the Mahagathbandhan sort of had the upper hand in terms of its ability to serve as a glue and pull all the disparate regional parties together into a composite whole. And frankly, that composite whole was quite formidable for the BJP. You saw the BJP being very, very nervous. But from January through to February, two things seem to have happened. On the one hand, both the Congress as well as the other regional parties' ability to glue themselves together in a pre-poll story seems to have lost some of that momentum. And certainly even as the national security story began to play out after Pulwama in the middle of February, the BJP also began to send out messages, at least that was my way of interpreting it, to all its current and potential allies, that it was willing to be occasionally conciliatory when necessary. And so, while the Congress was struggling to get all of its alliances together, the BJP was very quietly and quite effectively and methodologically stitching these up in other places. Would that mean that the BJP is presenting or signaling to future allies that it's willing to bend when it needs to bend, and that would that then be the opportunity for allies to come together? And has the Congress failure to stitch these alliances as was expected, would that serve as serve the Congress's disadvantage in the post-election scenario?
Well, as far as the question of Congress stitching alliances is concerned, I think they are in a better shape than they were in 14. You have the JDS Congress alliance in Karnataka, which is the first which has never happened.
Yeah.
If I'm right, the Congress and the DMK parted ways in 14. All of them contested separately, and whereas they are now also left blocking place there. The only place where there seems to be a hitch is Delhi, where apparently negotiations are still going on. Bengal have a different take. So I think it might actually help the Trinamool Congress now that the Congress and the left are not even relaxed. Because anyway they were never going to be aligned with the dominant party. Trinamool was never interested in an alliance. And it makes sense from a Mamata Banerjee perspective because she is interested in maximizing her own seats. So we can come back to Bengal if you want. But I think the fact I think the Congress has realized that it cannot sort of portray itself as the national alternative to the BJP. It simply doesn't have that kind of traction. There was no way Samajwadi Party or the Bahujan Samaj Party would have entertained Congress's demand for even 10 seats. And the Congress did not do this in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan. Contesting elections. It dropped BSP the wrong way. And Akhilesh has been on record on saying these things. So I still, my gut feeling is if we take out the Congress also, the index of opposition unity vis-a-vis the BJP or the ND is going to be better. For example, the Congress and the NCP fell out in the Maharashtra Assembly elections after 14. They are not now back. They have also given a couple of seats to other smaller players. But this contradiction between the BJP and the Congress, as you pointed out, is interesting, and there's a bit of contrast here. The Congress's strategy seems to be there are local tensions. They would not sort of give a couple of seats to the Aam Aadmi Party in Haryana or Punjab, maybe to strike an alliance in Delhi. But there's a broad ideological consensus as well. That all of us have to be anti-BJP. Rahul Gandhi goes to Wayanad and says, I won't say a word against the CPM.
Yeah.
Rahul Gandhi, Congress leaders are saying that we do business with the SP and the BSP. Whereas in the BJP's case, there seems to be ideological tension but local sort of alliances. So the JDU will say, we are not for abrogation of 370, we are not for abrogation of 35A. The Shiv Sena attack the BJP from a far right perspective and demonetization of that. So you have an interesting contradiction here. The Congress says we are on the same page, but no, we are not in an electoral land. Whereas the BJP's allies seem to have an ideological problem, both from the left and the right with the BJP. But they have hurried their hatchet for the timing and have got into their alliance. One has to see how this plays out, because as of now, one has no idea what these ideological contradictions mean at the government.
And what it also means when it comes to government formation, because at that point everyone's pragmatic side comes to the fore. Rahul, let me come back to you. As you were talking about the polls, you did say that the polls were conducted right after Balakot, at the height of national security issues, and that it automatically may well have had an impact on how future voters were responding to the questions that they were being presented. It seems to me that, and as Roshan also said, that in some senses, 2014, BJP went in talking about the economy and changing India on the back of its economy. 2019, BJP is being as quiet as it possibly can on the economy, and surprisingly for the BJP, that has been running this government very much on an agenda of big ideas, ambitious targets, grand achievements. The grand narrative is always of great success. But when it comes to the manifesto, they are quite tempered. When it comes to the election rhetoric, they are very tempered on what they have done. In some senses, they are going to the elections talking about what they will do in the next 5 years with PM Kisan, Ayushman Bharat, and so on and so forth. And they're focusing very much on security, identity. This sort of idea of India has become very much part of their narrative. Whereas, funnily enough, the Congress has a much more solid, whatever quibbles you may have with the manifesto, you may like it, you may not like it, but you can't argue with the fact that there is a story on the economy that they are trying to present. Is the BJP, has the BJP's own internal polling and internal strategy convinced them that the economy, despite all the rural distress, these are the things that trump the Indian voter? In your own work, you remind us often that the Indian voter is increasingly voting on the grounds of the economy. So how does that then reconcile with what we are seeing in these polls and these differing narratives?
So I sort of agree with you. Congress's manifesto seems like a much more thought out document in comparison to BJP's, which seems like a hurriedly put document with national security at the top. What I think has happened, that Congress now has too many things to offer, but it is coming very late in the game on most of the things. So it took, between what you were asking, Roshan, between December 2018 when they won 3 elections and March, they did not do extraordinary things. When you are challenging a party like BJP, which is much more resourceful and organized, and when you are challenging a Prime Minister like Narendra Modi, who is much more charismatic, you need to be doing extraordinary things. Nyaya scheme came very late. It seemed like they are responding to the agenda of BJP as direct cash transfer. They brought Priyanka Gandhi. I don't know what kind of effect she's going to have, but they brought her into the game very late. So Congress, in that sense, as a machine to contest election, is coming very late into the game. So you have a well put out document, but then you don't have time to sort of like transmit what you have in this document.
But I will say one thing, that what they've done with Nyaya, I was just look at the headline. headlines today. Rahul Gandhi is going to file his nomination papers in Amethi and has got a t-shirt saying Nyay 72,000 rupees. I mean, they are also, it seems like in some ways they are trying to learn. Perhaps it looks like, you know, you're the kid that came last and now you're trying to come into the top 10.
Yeah.
But they are learning from the guys that came in the top 10 last time on how to take your ideas, pitch them, and then make them, you know, and that's that consistent messaging. And we're still only in the first phase of what is a long month and a half.
No, I completely agree with you on that. In fact, in my opinion, Congress has been making effort to divert the attention from national security to economic concerns and economic issues. I don't know whether you both would agree to this or not, but I also have a feeling that there are moments in political time when you as an opposition may do many things which seem right, but nothing sticks.
Yeah.
So the tragedy of the Congress's campaign at the moment is nothing sticks in minds of Indian voters, or at least they're not able to sustain those moments. Just like recount to the past of 1971, even this talk of grand coalition. At that time in 1971, four big opposition parties had formed a national grand coalition against Indira Gandhi. But Indira Gandhi won with a bigger mandate. At least I just like used a bad cricket analogy that when Virendra Sehwag or Chris Gayle are in sort of top form, it doesn't matter how the bowler is bowling. Even a good Yorker is made a full toss, and a miss hit also carries to the boundary. So it's just like the political moment in time where Congress is not able to capitalize on what they are doing. Plus, Congress is caught in its own internal dilemma. Whether what should they prioritize on? Should they be prioritizing on building the whole party ground up, or should they be basically their first motive should be to defeat Modi and BJP at any cost? So that's the internal dilemma they're going to face. BJP, on the other hand, is very clear. That the nationalism and national security issue gives them an advantage. So a national security crisis across the globe gives incumbent an advantage, whoever the incumbent is. And if the incumbent is a right-wing variety, then they have a greater advantage. So BJP knows after Pulwama that this is their pitch, they are going to play on it. And we saw that in their manifesto, nationalism was on the first page. Now, what is important and what I wrote in today's piece is that if you go in the field, even the surveys, even Lokniti surveys basically point out, when you ask voter what is your most important issue, everyone talks about unemployment, they talk about development, they talk about Bijli Sadak Pani. But in the same survey, people are voting for BJP, not Congress, which talks about these issues in their manifesto. People also think that on many economic concerns, they think things have improved in past 1 year. So what has happened, that nationalism or hard stance on nationalism has become the lens to view every other thing. So national security concerns basically improves the rating of the leadership, and this is what is happening. BJP is not contesting this election. Narendra Modi is contesting this election on behalf of BJP, and the party is playing a second fiddle to Modi. So the moment has given that natural advantage to Modi, and BJP is just exploiting that.
I also agree.
Yeah, I was just going to come to that. Yeah.
So, on the manifesto question, I think it is absolutely clear, and I don't think the BJP even pretends it is the case otherwise. For them, their brand is man.
Right.
There's absolutely no questions asked. They are essentially asking the electorate to sort of repose faith in Narendra Modi. And manifestos are all beyond the point. There's nothing surprising in the.
No, but I think the difference with the manifestos is all that it's done is that it's made it easier now to say there is a Congress narrative and there is a
I looked at the 2009 manifesto of BJP. And
Right.
the 9 elections came within months of the Bombay terror attacks. So then also they had led with national security. So India is a threat and that sort of narrative was there. But I think the more important question vis-a-vis the Congress is, now let us not forget that after 2014, the Congress was essentially looking at a survival crisis in this country. Their seats had fallen to 44, their vote share was at an all-time low. And even before the elections, Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi probably was a bigger anti-BJP symbol than the Congress was.
Yeah.
I think one has to give credit to the Congress party and essentially Rahul Gandhi that no matter what happens, even the pollsters are not saying this election is going to be a matter of survival for the Congress party. So they are there as a clear number 2 to the BJP. Now politics is a long game. We just know, do far more unpredictable and ruthless things than we know. But the Congress has addressed its survivor question. That by itself is no mean feat. You were able to dislodge governments in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, which were there for 15 years. Even in Gujarat, which was Narendra Modi's home, despite the BJP getting close to 50% of the vote share, Congress did make some gains. Now, we hear of defections and all from the Congress, but the Congress has secured for itself this social democratic space, and which is what I think the manifesto tries to do. Now that we are going to be entering a phase in India's politics where the communist variety of left has been new, it will cease to exist as an important political bloc, and they have been wiped out. They probably won't even get one seat in Bengal. Tripura, there is a crisis. If they suffer a serious setback in Kerala, we never know what's going to happen to them. So somebody or other was bound to take that social democratic space. I think the Congress very shrewdly situated itself. This entire posturing vis-a-vis the formulation of the manifesto, the public consultations and all that. I do not believe that there would be something in the manifesto which the entire Congress party was not game on and because the public was saying.
Yeah, of course.
It is essentially posturing that now the Congress has to champion the social democratic space, and it is an important thing because no matter what happens in this election, the Bharatiya Janata Party and Narendra Modi is a far more right-wing party than what it was under Atal Bihari Vajpayee or its earlier leadership. So, as India heads towards the right versus left sort of bipolar politics, because the BJP is making no pretense about it. They will go even rightward if they get a bigger majority this time, or they will come back with power.
But not in their approach to the economy. They are going much more rightward in terms of their approach to nationalism, security. Their approach to the economy in some senses there's been more consensus on welfare.
Even there, I think there's a difference between the Congress and the BJP approach. So the BJP's approach has been, let's do demonetization, let's do GST, let's formalize. So and that shows in the manifesto also. So they promise 25 lakh crores of investment in rural India. They promise, I think, even bigger amount in terms of infrastructure, some 10 lakh. Infrastructure. So it is more on the macro side of it. Whereas if you look at the Congress's campaign, each state election, its farm loan waivers, the price terms of trade crises. So there's a more leftward tilt in the Congress's electoral plan as well. Even on the economy, they're saying we'll reform the GST and all that is there, and demonetization and all that is. So there is a clear economic divide also. And the end objective continues to be the same, because both of them say that India has to grow and all that. But they essentially believe that somehow mass purchasing powers have been hit under the BJP regime, even though the numbers are good, and although there's a huge controversy about the numbers also.
Yeah.
So that way, which is why I said it's a social democratic
space.
And
actually, you're right that the Congress has now re-articulated its welfare agenda more explicitly on the back of redistribution, and in some ways moved away from the old talk of rights and entitlements to be much more explicit on redistribution, and that's the core.
And even on Nyaya, Rahul, so it was essentially the Congress which sort of preempted the BJP's announcement. Because the first announcement came before the budget, and they announced the details much later. But I think they've been shrewdly targeting that poor 20% segment, which traditionally was always with the Congress, but shifted big time to the BJP. So, for example, something like the Chhattisgarh result, it would not have been possible without the formidable shift of the poorest population in favor of the Congress. That is what I think they are eyeing.
But that's a very interesting thing you are going to say. If Congress is moving much more leftward in terms of occupying the social democratic space, would this mean that Congress is basically going to take the space of many regional parties because these poor segments vote for regional parties and not the BJP? So in a way we are moving towards a polity, and this may be the reason many regional parties are not forthcoming to align with Congress, because Congress in a sense is going to hurt them by the way, in the direction it is moving.
One more question. I think linked to this, I think if you look at the Congress narrative, it has interestingly through Nyaya sort of tried to push the conversation a lot more towards income inequalities and far less in some senses on historical discriminations, caste inequalities and so on. And of course the two are in some ways aligned, but the emphasis on redistribution is, I think, trying to create a new class politics, which perhaps, I'm not sure if this is by design or by default, but there does seem to be an interesting move here.
Exactly. For example, one of the facts which the BJP is celebrating in this in the 19 campaign, they managed low inflation throughout their campaign, whereas inflation was in double digits during the
And that always hurts the income.
But the crux of the matter is, in India, almost 45% of the inflation basket is food. So a low inflation also means farm prices are depressed. And especially if you have traveled extensively in Madhya Pradesh, and Madhya Pradesh, western parts of the state are not a place where people are poor. So farmers are there now, they do commercial farming, and they say Bihar or Eastern UP, these places where subsistence farming dominates. For them, the biggest question was prices, because if you are selling soya at 4,000, 5,000 rupees a quintal, and prices have gone down to 1,200. So the BJP will definitely gain among the urban voters for this, because for them, price rise, whether it's food or anything else, matters. But I don't know how this will play out with the farmers. If you're actually celebrating that prices have been low, and your opposition is able to convince the voters that they're essentially celebrating your distress, I mean, these things could play out very interestingly in election. You never know.
Sure. Well, we are hitting question hour. Hashtag Election Adda. Do send us your questions. Do we already have a list of questions? Thank you, Varun. Let's start with those. Okay, the first question is, which regional party has played their cards best?
Like I said, she continues to be the most dominant political force in West Bengal. Had the Congress and the BJP, the Congress and the left allied in West Bengal, because it clearly shows from 14 to 16 elections. So where they sort of allied, because essentially when the Congress split in West Bengal, the northern part of the state, the party stayed with the Congress, whereas Mamata was able to work out with the southern party, and which is in terms of seats, it's a bigger number in West Bengal. But the contest in north had always been between the Congress and the left. So even when Mamata captured power in 2011, and the 6 seats, 2 the CPM and 4 which the Congress won in West Bengal, all of them were from the north. Now when the Congress and the left allied in 2016 assembly elections, their combined vote share shrunk very drastically. Because when two dominant forces, say, for example, what is happening in South Karnataka today, if the Congress and the JDS come together, some third political force is bound to come up, because that political vacuum won't exist. Now that they are both fighting the elections separately, and my gut says Mamata must have had prevailed on the Congress to do this. The more opposition votes are split in West Bengal, the more it dampens BJP's chances of converting its votes into seats. So had that anti-Mamata vote consolidated,
the BJP would have made big gains. But it does, the BJP certainly seems to be banking on West Bengal as one place where it could make up for some of the losses of UP. So what does that mean then for Mamata?
So BJP sympathizers or insiders actually believe that don't be surprised if West Bengal turns out to be Tripura this time. So they are basically banking on a landslide in West Bengal where they can cross, say, 25 seats. So I agree with Roshan that what might happen in West Bengal, that BJP may make big gains in terms of vote share. So in 2014 they had around 16%, and the latest Lokniti polls put them around 26-27, whereas C voter puts them around 32-33. So now, if they are touching 30% mark, it can mean that they end up getting just 7 to 8 seats, so a very small improvement from 2014. But if their vote shares are concentrated in certain pockets of West Bengal, that could also mean that they convert 15 to 18 seats. So West Bengal is on a cusp of change. Even if BJP doesn't sort of win seat, BJP becomes the second party, where it was non-existent 4 years ago. Same thing is going to happen in Odisha. So in Odisha, the politics is much more interesting, where what is emerging is a West Odisha, East Odisha divide, regional divide, where in eastern part of Odisha, BJP is still going to hold its fort, but BJP is making inroads in western Odisha. So again, if they manage to sort of concentrate in that region, seat conversion would be higher. On the question of regional parties, I think other than, so Mamata definitely played her cards very well. The other party would be YRSP. The reason why I say it, that in the way they conducted their politics, they forced TDP or Chandrababu Naidu to make demands on NDA, leave the party, form an alliance. So it's a very long campaign, which is very
In fact, actually, they haven't got enough credit for what they've done.
And they haven't aligned with either BJP or Congress. They have left the card open. So in a sense,
they've played the old school party politics game, which India has sort of forgotten of late.
YSR was a shrewd politician.
Yeah.
Not from YSR, you would not have seen the UDFR.
True. Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks. Let's come to the second question. I think we've kind of touched upon it a little bit in the course of our discussion, but we can go into a little more depth. Will the BJP face issues with its ideology when trying to stitch up its coalitions? I presume this means post-elections.
This is an interesting question. The reason being, and why I say this interesting, in most of our conversation, we put ideological position and pragmatism as if they are mutually exclusive. These are not two domains. Having an ideological position does not mean that I am going to be unpragmatic, right? So you can maintain certain core positions on which you are going to not compromise, but you leave a lot of things open which can be compromised and you become pragmatic. So yes, on certain things there would be tensions, but on other things, parties everywhere. So ideology is not so that you could lose elections, right? Ideology is there which can generate passions and you could easily mobilize people. So on certain things, BJP may, or any political party which has ideological meaning, will have some problems, but then politics is also the game of possibility, where you sit together, find a consensus and work for a couple of years, and then when you have to sort of like move away from each other, you play the ideology card.
Yeah, that is true. Our politicians are quite pragmatic about how they view ideology. Roshan, what's your take?
No, I completely agree with Rahul. I mean, your ideology can only be implemented if you are in power. I think political parties understand this more than. Maharashtra is the best example. They did contest with the Shiv Sena, formed the state government. They gave the mayorship of Mumbai municipality to the Shiv Sena. I mean, places like Odisha would be far more interesting, where Naveen Patnaik in his formative years allied with the BJP, gained a strong foothold in the state, then dumped the BJP. Now that the BJP, so the Congress is going down, and in those days Congress used to be the main adversary. Now that the Congress is sort of atrophying and the BJP is coming up, will we see a Naveen Patnaik U-turn? Will we do business with the Congress probably? And these are very interesting questions which one can, because Odisha will also have assembly elections along with the Lok Sabha elections.
Yeah.
And these questions can only be answered.
Yeah. But to the question that, this is an election of Narendra Modi versus states, that regional parties, even if their vote share, the vote share of the others may be seeing some fluctuation towards the bottom more than, at least in the polls compared to the past, regional parties still matter significantly to the future of Indian politics despite the national footprint of the BJP. Do you see this as a Narendra Modi versus states or Narendra Modi versus Congress and states?
Well, there are two ways to look at it. So if you go by historical stats, 1989 onwards, regional parties have more or less maintained a 50% vote share in our country. And there's no reason to believe that this will change drastically in this one election. Even in 14 it did not change.
Sure.
The other way to look at it is regional parties are also extremely personality-centric parties. For example, what after Mamata Banerjee? What happens to Trinamool Congress? What after Naveen Patnaik? I think these issues mattered in people like Mukul Roy switching to the BJP, Jayapal switching to the BJP. Now, can Akhilesh stabilize the Samajwadi Party? Will BSP have a future beyond Marvel? I think these are extremely difficult questions, and I personally believe that this is also linked to the impact of 25 years of economic reforms in our country. Now, issues like caste, because regional parties are essentially about caste. So they are either dominant caste coalitions or multi-caste coalitions, such as in Tamil Nadu, OBC have a very big share in population. So I think all political parties, including the BJP and the Congress, have struggled to come to terms as to how to balance their core ideology, say Hindutva with market, in left case resulting in a complete disaster. Now, how they address these contradictions, where a party of Jats is trying with a party of Jatavs now. You can't imagine it, Jats have been historically in the Kulak class industry, Jats are at the bottom of the social ladder. Now that they are trying to protect their local interests, because I think questions of development, etc. So for a Yadav voter, development might not just mean, say, better roads or highways. It could also mean having a Yadav SHO or a Yadav or a Yadav minister.
Absolutely.
So, and under Narendra Modi, this one method to the BJP is also an extremely centralized party like the Congress used to do in the days of Indira Gandhi. So, chief ministers, UP probably is an exception, who are not very strong from non-dominant castes, etc. So I think we have yet not seen the last of how this contradiction sort of go and play out in politics. One will have to see as to how it happens.
So I would like to add a couple of things to what Roshan said. If you look at politics in long horizon, long play. What is happening is basically parties are changing form from this national to regional lens, and so with diversity like India, you are going to have multiple players.
Sure.
But somehow in our public discourse, we try to pitch as if regional parties are very good and national parties are bad, something like that. But if you
or the other way around.
yeah, other way around, right?
Yeah.
National parties are good for stability, regional parties increase diversity, but they lead to instability. But if you think what is happening is basically you're moving from a Congress dominant system to a BJP dominant system, right? Basically, one national party. So in 50s, what was Jalsa? It was basically a regional party in some senses, in London Belt. Or in 70s or 80s, Janata Dal was a regional party which became was actually a national party, but which became many national parties. So what is happening is that we are again moving to a political system where one party will play a role of a dominant national party. So BJP will not be, if they win the election as these polls are predicting, BJP is not going to be in a similar position as Congress was in 50s and 60s. But for sure, BJP is now a party which has its reach across India. It has now reached east. If it makes inroads in West Bengal and Orissa, east is complete. They have inroads in Karnataka, they were in government. Kerala, they are bound to increase vote share. So in that sense, now BJP would be the only pan-India party, whereas Congress is going to have pockets of influence. And most other regional parties in the 70s and 80s, with socialist parties which has presence in 3 or 4 states, have shrunk to one state.
Yeah.
So it's basically, the components are same, but they're just changing their forms.
Well, I think the impact that is going to have on the nature of our polity and the future of our democracy is going to be quite significant in some senses, even as these shifts are taking place. And it does seem, just to pick up from what you're saying, that, just as the economy is now reaching the sort of, is hitting a glass ceiling post 1991, and a new phase has to be, we have to enter into a new phase. I think our politics too is reaching the limits of all the transitions that took place post 1991, and we are at the tipping point of a new phase. And so I think, to my mind, I think this election is going to be critical, not just for shaping the future sort of narrative on democracy and the idea of India, but also for what India's economy is going to look like and how its politics responds to its economy. Thank you very much, Roshan, and thank you very much, Rahul. I knew this would be a fascinating conversation, and I hope that the Election Adda can bring you back for more as the next month and a half rolls out. As India heats up, so does Election Adda. Look forward to seeing you again. #Election Adda. Thank you.